Hello everybody and welcome to the first of the lockdown webinar series, free professional development webinars that I'm running through NK Institute for mainly kinesiology professionals but obviously other people from other health modalities, it's okay. So I got the idea to run this series because later this month I was supposed to be presenting at a conference in the United Kingdom in Oxford, and of course everything's cancelled because of the current pandemic situation. And they asked me if I'd be interested to do a webinar. Then I thought, then I saw online a lot of kinesiologists complaining that they couldn't do CPEs, and I thought, well, maybe I should offer a way of doing CPEs because I'm locked down too in my beautiful house here in Mooloolaba. And I luckily got home in time before I could avoid all the draconian measures that are happening at the moment. So I had the idea to run some free webinars for professional kinesiologists to help update your skills and maybe share a few things that I've learned over the last 20 years. And certainly it's not about the things I've learned, it's also the way I learn things, because I think maybe I have a unique way of understanding things. And I've written over 100 kinesiology courses now and got well over 100 publications in kinesiology. And so over this time, I've learned to understand the way, the way kinesiology and energy medicine, because kinesiology is really energy medicine, and how that works. So here we are, and we're all in lockdown, and I hope you all enjoy this. It's something that I've put together over the last couple of months. And of course, this one's about the coronavirus. And, this started in February. I was in Ecuador when my father was, his health was going downhill, and I was spending a lot of time over there. And I read an article about the coronavirus, and, by then in February, it wasn't so bad. I mean, everyone was traveling. I mean, I was going skiing in the mountains of the United States and Austria, and everything was all good. But I was kind of fascinated by this coronavirus and the way how infectious it is and the problem they were having with it. And the more I looked into it, I just ended up writing all this stuff down. And then I thought, oh, let's do a course. And then I told everyone I'd do this course. And then a month later, it's become a pandemic, and there's a lot of stress and in the world. And obviously we're having, everyone all over the world are having problems moving. This weekend's the Easter weekend, and I was reading that police will fine you if you don't have a good reason to be even driving your car, So we're in quite an extraordinary situation, and I'm here to share something with you to help you understand. Maybe you can continue your businesses. So a lot of people have been, like most kinesiologists are not allowed to talk to balance people, but that doesn't mean that you can't. And I've done remote balancing and distance balancing. I'm going to actually do a demonstration later on balancing myself, which is something new. In the previous workshops I've been teaching in the last couple of weeks, which has been nutrition and workshops about the coronavirus, I've been demonstrating remote balancing, which is, I call remote balancing is when you're in a different location and but you're connected through something like Zoom or Skype or something like this, or WebEx, whatever. But I'm going to do a self-balance, and I think maybe I'll get everyone while I'm doing it to balance yourselves as well. It'll be kind of fun, because I think, the way this coronavirus is heading, it's becoming an archetype or even a miasm that's going to become an ingrained stress in the consciousness of humanity for generations to come. So the more that we can work with it to try and lift this, the more we can actually help our children and their children. And certainly I want to see my boys and their children sort of have not have this stress hanging over them as they live their lives. So that's the plan. And yeah, so let's start the course. And so I'll share the screen. I think you can all see that. Give me a thumbs up, everyone. Okay, thank you. All right, so the coronavirus. So what we'll be covering in this webinar is we'll be looking at coronavirus physiology. And so I'll explain what this coronavirus does that's very similar to previous coronaviruses, but I'll also explain what's different about this coronavirus and what makes it so infectious. They say it's 100 to 1,000 times more infectious than other coronaviruses. And that's because of the way it enters the cell, which is similar to the way HIV or Ebola enters the cell, not like the other coronaviruses. So we'll look at that. We'll look at some kinesiology at the end, including acupressure formatting. I'll talk a little bit about that. And about 18 years ago, when I wrote my second immune course, I did this database of pathogens, and sitting in there is a little format for coronavirus. So I'm going to share that with you, and I'm going to show you how you can use that in your clinic or just with working, because you could, formats are awesome things, but you can't just use them by themselves. If you have a format, you've got to use it in a way that you can integrate into your current kinesiological practice. And then I'll also be looking, I will go through the immune system and how does the immune system respond to the coronavirus, and we'll certainly be looking at inflammation, and I'll give a big rave about inflammation and chronic inflammation and resolution of inflammation. It's all really fascinating stuff. I mean, of course, I find all these things fascinating. And I'll be talking about the natural killer cells and the T killer cells and antibody production and all that kind of thing. So these are some of the things we'll be talking about, and might even get to talk about a few of the emotions of the coronavirus, because this coronavirus creates a lot of an emotion. And so what we have to understand is that part of the strategy you're going to employ when you're working with people is resolving the emotion around it. People have lost their jobs, or they're stuck at home with their family and that's hell or something. So there's a lot of emotion going around the world. And especially, when I look, the other day I read an article about what's going on in Ecuador, and it just breaks my heart. And you see what's happened in Italy and Spain, and even the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom was very ill. This is having such a major impact on the way we can possibly live our lives. So I think addressing emotions, and most of you who are kinesiologists, you do emotional balancing. I mean, I do it the way I do it with the neural emotional pathways. It's a pretty cool thing, but you just work the way you do. And so I'll talk a little bit about that, and some interesting things that are connections I've had with some friends of mine, international. There's one guy in the United States, Steve Hansen, another woman in Madrid, Monica Blasquez, who have spoken to me. We talk about the emotional states. So about the coronavirus, basically it's a group of viruses that cause upper respiratory tract infections. There are 7 known coronaviruses that infect humans, so it's not so many. And there's plenty more that don't infect humans, but what happens is when they jump species, and this particular one, they say it's derived from a bat coronavirus, or it has 90% the same genome as a bat coronavirus. That's pretty clear because the coronavirus only actually has 10 genes. So it means 9 are the same as a bat coronavirus. And it's 70% the same as the old SARS virus from 2002. So there you go, 7 genes the same. So pretty easy to calculate that. It has a single strand of RNA, and it's called corona because that's Latin and Spanish for crown. And you can see here, when you look at all of this, you can see these little spikes sticking out make it look at it like a crown. And these little things sticking out are the so-called spike protein, which you may have heard of. The spike protein is this whole thing, you know, you turn on the news and it's spike protein this and spike protein that. I mean, the thing about the spike protein is what it does, it causes that initial connection to the cell. So the spike protein connects to the cell, and that's the first step in the virus invading your cell. So the thing is the virus needs to, it can't reproduce itself by itself. It needs to use you to reproduce. So that in itself is something pretty incredible. So this is diagrammatic representation of the coronavirus. You can see here this red is called the viral envelope. It's in a human or an animal or bacteria, this would be called membrane, and it's the same structure. It's a phospholipid bilayer. And you can see in it, it's got a number of proteins and glycoproteins, which is like a human cell or bacteria cell, or cells have molecules embedded in the membrane. The glycoprotein here, it's called S for spike. So glycoprotein means it's got a few little sugar molecules stuck on it. This here, this golden coil is the RNA, and this is the genetic material of this virus. It's an RNA virus. Not all viruses are RNA viruses. Some viruses are DNA viruses. So when we look at these are the different these are the 7 different coronaviruses that infect humans. And, you know, I like to look at patterns, and, you know, for me to understand a pattern, I have to look at the whole, because, you know, to me, when I look at something, I need to see how the whole thing exists to understand the individual. And so for me, to understand this COVID-19, which is the disease, the virus is actually called SARS coronavirus 2 here. I mean, I need to understand all 7 to fully get this. And when I can understand all 7 to fully understand this, then I can develop a system for balancing it much more effectively. You know, because to me, it's about the overall pattern, and what part of this is of the overall pattern. So you can see here, these 4 here, these 2 and these 2 form the common cold. And then you've got here the MERS coronavirus, which is Middle East Respiratory Syndrome from 2012. The original SARS coronavirus, that only infected about 10,000 people. It wasn't very infectious. So, you know, I mean, they started to develop a vaccine and all this kind of thing, but in the end, they never did, because it just kind of died out. This one, on the other hand, is extremely infectious. And this is the problem. It's why it spreads so quickly. And often people are carrying it and they're infectious when they don't even know they have it. They're asymptomatic at that point. So it really makes this is very difficult to control. And that's why we're all locked down in our homes and only allowed to travel somewhere if it's essential travel. Like today, I went to the farmer's market and I went to the bottle shop. You know, both things are essential, right? And, you know, and that's just the way it is. So let's have a look at the virus life cycle. So here you can see you've got represented a coronavirus, and you can see here this is what they call the envelope, but you can see the details of the phospholipid bilayer. So in any other being, like even a bacteria or a human, animal, cell, they would call this a membrane, but for viruses they call them envelopes. It's just a name. Who cares? Whatever. Yeah, you can see the different proteins, and this black one is the spike protein. And you can see here that it locks on to molecules that are on your cell membrane. So your membrane's not a smooth thing. Like if you are really minute and walking along your membrane, it'd be like walking in a forest. And so there's so there's plenty of molecules here. And so what this does, it logs on to a molecule called proteoglycan. So what is a proteoglycan? Sounds pretty fancy. What it is really kind of a short protein with these long saccharide chains on them called glycosaminoglycans, or GAGs they call them. So there's one specific part of one of those called heparan sulfate. And so the coronavirus logs onto your the spike protein logs onto this heparan sulfate. And then what happens, it finds an enzyme that's on your cell membrane. So what we think about enzymes, often people think of enzymes, usually it's, oh yeah, I've got digestion, but you know, you have enzymes in every cell in your body. They can be intracellular, but we also have them sitting on our cell membrane, like they're membrane bound. So it gets these membrane bound enzymes to activate its proteins to enable it entry. So the old coronaviruses used to use an enzyme called the ACE2 receptor, which is the angiotensin converting enzyme. It actually makes angiotensin 2, which is an activated form of that hormone. And that causes the coronavirus to enter the cell by a system of endocytosis. But the Ebola and HIV use another enzyme called the TMPRSS2, I think it's called, from memory. It's in the course I'm teaching. I've taught it 6 times in the last week, so these days it just rolls off my tongue. But anyway, so what that does is when that enzyme activates the proteins on the coronavirus, it causes membrane fusion, which means the envelope of the virus fuses with the membrane of the human. And that just basically causes the virus to dump the genetic material into the cell, which is pretty nasty. It's very quick and overwhelming for the cell. So the virus is basically getting in, is committing hurry, because you can see and hear this is this genetic material, which is the viral RNA wrapped around these turquoise little blobs called the N proteins, or nucleocapsid proteins, and they kind of protect the RNA. And it's just the same in human DNA. It's, you know, when you look at the chromosomes, they're wrapped around histone proteins, and that's kind of protecting for the DNA. And so it's a very similar concept that you've got here, is when the genetic material is inactive, I mean, it's wrapped around the some protein, and to activate it, you've got to open it up and get to the RNA. In humans, we do that. You know, we have various epigenetic factors that can open or close the DNA, you know, to either enhance or inhibit the gene expression. Epigenetics is about gene expression. So anyway. So once the genetic material gets in, you can see here, this is the strand of the RNA and it will produce a protein, but you've also got this enzyme called virus polymerase. So the virus polymerase is actually basically reproduces the genetic material. So this is a viral protein. So it's part of the viral genome. You know, one of the 10 genes. 10 genes. That's all it has. So, so you can see here, this is all involved with reproducing the genetic material. And over here, this is the rough endoplasmatic reticulum. So those of you who are pretty up with all the, you know, cell speak, so to speak, you know, understand what's going on in the cell. The rough endoplasmatic reticulum is a site basically where you produce proteins here in the ribosome, then the proteins go inside to be modified. So in humans, normally that would be glycosylation, you know, like adding monosaccharides to it or amino sugars as part of the modification of the protein to get it in its active form. So a glycoprotein starts as a protein, then you've got to add the saccharides onto it, which are usually monosaccharides or amino sugars like, you know, glucosamine, galactosamine, or, you know, fucose, or any of these kind of things, galactose. But what you see here, this is the membrane of the rough endoplasmatic reticulum. And so what happens here when you get the reproduced RNA, and here you've got some of the N proteins or the nucleocapsid, they all wrap around the RNA, then they come here. And you can see here you've got the protein, the viral proteins embedded in the membrane, and don't ask me how it does that. It even knows which side to embed them on, I mean, seriously. And then this comes in and like goes in and pinches a part of the membrane to give the virus. So this is a reproduced virus down here. And what you can see with that the envelope is actually the membrane of your rough endoplasmatic reticulum. So it basically is using you to reproduce. And when we have a look at the enzymes, you know, it even uses your energy, your ATP that you produce in your mitochondria to reproduce itself. Once it's done that, it heads out, so it can get through the membrane. Here again, it's pinching your membrane. This becomes a Golgi vesicle or secretory vesicle, because normally what happens is a protein will go from the rough endoplasmatic reticulum, then it's transported to the Golgi apparatus where it's modified again and then secreted. So here what happens, you can see that the virus is enveloped here, excuse me, enveloped here by the membrane of the rough endoplasmatic reticulum, then that then binds here and gets out. So basically that's how the virus reproduces itself, and because this virus uses the membrane fusion technique, it gets in much quicker, so creates havoc much quicker and then starts spreading around your body. Okay. So this is the SARS coronavirus 2 genome. And so you can see here, it's they're the 10 genes. So very early in the piece, you know, as I said, I actually was researching this back in February before it got to really pandemic stage. I was saying this could be a pandemic, but it hadn't really got there yet. But of course, we know it is there now. So we got to the pandemic stage, and so these are the 10 proteins. So the first one is called ORF3a. So open reading frame means it's a gene. And you can see some of them, they're basically ORF1 to ORF10. So you can see here that this first one is the enzyme, and you can see these EC numbers are enzyme numbers. And so a molecule, most enzymes, 99.99% of the time, enzymes are proteins, but there's always some exception, especially there's an RNA enzyme in your genetics that actually makes proteins. But, you know, I always say if in the human biochemistry, if there's a rule, my rule is there's always at least one exception to the rule. So there's always an exception. But anyway, so a protein is given an enzyme number. The enzyme number is about the biochemical reaction that it catalyzes. So enzymes catalyze biochemical reactions. So you can see that this enzyme, this protein's got two enzyme numbers. So that means the one protein does two things. First one, it's an RNA helicase, which unwinds the RNA, which means you can actually start reproducing it. And then you've got, it's a virus replication enzyme. And we'll look at that in a little bit more detail in a moment. Then you've got the ORF3a protein, and this transports viral genome to neighbouring cells. So this is basically the molecule that causes it to get into the cell, so the one that's very rapid. Then you've got, the other one that's kind of interesting is this one down here, the ORF8. This is the spike protein. And so this is the initial attachment to the heparin sulfate on the host cell proteoglycans involved in fusion of viral and cellular membranes, leading to virus entry into the host cell. Sounds kind of nasty, and it is. So a little bit more detail. So if you look at the ORF1a-B, the 2778, this is the RNA-directed RNA polymerase. This is the viral genome replication. You find it in most RNA viruses, and you have two types of viruses. The RNA viruses are the simpler ones because they've just got RNA, they get in there, and from RNA, like when we produce a protein, we have our DNA, we have to make a messenger RNA copy, and then that goes to the ribosome to make protein. So the viral RNA actually behaves exactly like messenger RNA. And so it's very simple. Whereas if you have a DNA virus, it's got to make a RNA copy, then you've got to make a DNA copy of that. So there's copy, copy, copy. And so it's a little bit more complex, and there's more viruses, and their genomes are probably a little bit bigger. I mean, I don't know. I have never really looked into it. This is the first virus I've actually looked into, but now people are asking me to look at other ones. I think I want to look at Epstein-Barr. It seems to be like a hot topic. So I've already done Borrelia, but that's a bacteria. So anyway. Okay. Now the other. So you can see here when you look at this, you can see the reaction. So the RNA, the N is the number of nucleotides, and you can see the nucleotide is here. And so you get RNA N+1. So that basically the nucleotide, you know, the ribonucleic acid has a ribose and a nucleotide. So basically you're increasing the units one by one. It's basically growing the RNA. The RNA helicase, on the other hand, I mean, that's a interesting thing. It unwinds the RNA, but it actually burns a molecule of ATP to do it. So it uses the ATP that you produced in your mitochondria. For you, it just hijacks your ATP. It hijacks your ribosomes. It hijacks your rough endoplasmatic reticulum. I mean, these things are like bloody hijackers, you know. It's like hijack a plane, why don't you? Hijack a cell and hijack this, hijack that. That's what they do. And that's the thing with it. And it's the same protein that does this. You can see here ATP and then you get ADP. So when you go from ATP to ADP, that means you've burnt a unit of energy. Adenosine triphosphate is energy in the human body. And the last phosphate is the high energy bond. And when you break off the phosphate and you're left with ADP, you release the energy. So then the body uses the energy. And the whole mitochondria, the purpose of the Krebs cycle, the electron transport chain, and all this kind of thing is all about producing ATP so your body can have energy. So this whole complex function, the virus hijacks your ATP to unwind itself, to make itself available for reproduction. Pretty nasty, right? This is the ORF3a. This is the one I mentioned before. It's called the transport molecule or protein. It causes the direct fusion between the virus envelope and the human membrane, but it also inhibits the TLR or the toll-like receptors. The toll-like receptors are part of the immune system, and you know they generate interferon, which is an immune hormone. Which when you need it, it's a good thing because it gets rid of things that shouldn't be there. And so it down-regulates all that and sort of all the downstream signaling pathways of the toll-like receptor, which are really important for the immune function. So that's what happens there. And then, of course, you've got the ORF3a. This is the spike protein. And this is the initial attachment to heparan sulfate, and you get the fusion. But also kind of interesting what it says here is it could be involved in the virus egress, which is basically getting out. So if you look here, this is the spike protein being a mechanism for the virus to actually get out, which is, you know, nasty pasty. So that's the viral physiology. What I'm going to look at now is the immune system. And the immune system, you know, there's basically three parts of the immune system we want to look at. The first one is inflammation. The second one is the adaptive immune system. And the third one is the natural killer cells of the non-specific immune system. And each one of them has a vital part in defense against a virus, but we also have to understand it, because if we're going to be working with people with COVID-19-like symptoms, and, you know, I've got my colleague in California, Steve, he's been working with COVID-19-like symptoms, and if you're lucky, I'll get to share some of the stuff he was talking about. But certainly you can look on our YouTube channel or our Facebook page, because I thought what he was doing was so important. We did an online interview and I recorded it and I posted it. So if you want to know more about that, look at the NK Institute, either our YouTube channel or our Facebook page, and you can look at that interview I did with Steve. And certainly, I mean, he's in a unique position because he works in an autoimmune clinic with a doctor. Medical doctor is completely open to kinesiology because he just sees the benefit for his clients, and all he cares about is the clients get better. And to me, that's a true medical professional. So, you know, so Stephen's a very knowledgeable kinesiologist, and he does very great work with NK, and he's also extended it with his own kind of flair, you know. So let's first look at inflammation. So inflammation has three phases. You've got the trigger. So with COVID-19, you know, what they found is in the lungs especially, there's a lot of fibrosis, and that's evidence of a lot of inflammation in the lungs. And so, you know, inflammation should be an acute response, but if it stays there too long, it gets chronic and causes a lot of danger. So there seems to be this inability of the immune system to resolve the inflammation. So there's 3 steps of inflammation. There's a trigger. In the case of COVID-19 patients, they have a trigger for, you know, is the virus. Then you have the pro-inflammatory phase. So you can see edema, which is swelling. PMN is the neutrophils. Then the monocytes kick in. And then monocytes have 2 stages. They can be pro-inflammatory or pro-resolving. That's M1 or M2. And then you get the resolution phase where you get tissue repair and regeneration. One of the things that's going on these days is people are staying in chronic inflammation, so the resolving phase is not happening. And especially these non-steroidal anti-inflammatories such as ibuprofen and paracetamol, they actually, while they're good for the symptoms of inflammation, they actually inhibit the pro-resolution. So people staying in chronic inflammation. And, you know, around 10 years ago, I wrote this series of workshops called the Pathology Hologram, and I was astounded by the amount of diseases that have chronic inflammation at their base. It's really unbelievable. It's so many. So that's the thing with that. When you look at the about inflammation, you've got the M1 and the M2. You have this trigger of inflammation, but the resolution, and they call the hormones specialized pro-resolving mediators. What's interesting is the hormones for inflammation and resolution are all released by the macrophages. So the M1 macrophage releases pro-inflammatory cytokines. So cytokines are proteins. And the M2 macrophage is pro-resolving, so it releases these class of hormones called resolvins, which are actually fatty acid derived and mainly derived from omega-3 fatty acids. So early on in the piece, I was sent a paper by a friend of mine. And in that paper, it listed all the pro-inflammatory cytokines that were found in COVID-19 patients. So you can see here all these interleukins. What this one here is interesting: fibroblast growth factor. They're the little buggers that produce scar tissue. So COVID-19 patients have a lot of scar tissue in their lungs, a lot. Here you've got interferon. These guys here are called chemokines. So chemokines promote chemotaxis. That's what they call chemokines. And chemotaxis is the attraction of other immune cells via a chemical messenger. So the chemokines attract immune cells. So because they cause the mechanism of attraction of the immune cells is by a chemical messenger. They call them chemokines. And this one here, tumor necrosis factor alpha, this is a very well-known one. It's a cell-killing hormone, because it kills tumor cells. But as we'll soon learn, the immune system treats tumor cells and virus-infected cells the same. It just sees them as abnormal cells that need to be gotten rid of. So it's like, you're not correct, kill, splat, dead. So tumor necrosis factor is one of these. So interesting about the pro-resolving mediators. I did all these seminars last year, learned about it, and it fascinated me, this. And they derive from fatty acids, arachidonic acid, DHA, DPA, and EPA. Arachidonic acid is omega-6. There's only 2. Most hormones derived from arachidonic acid are pro-inflammatory. except lipoxin A and B. So those two are anti-inflammatory. That's why they're here. Then these ones, these produce, DHA especially produces a lot, and same with EPA. The DPA ones are very rare and not so much talked about. But anyway, they are the precursors for the resolvins, and when the M2 macrophages release them, they promote tissue repair and the resolution of inflammation. So it could be interesting to look at that, especially if you're a naturopath and you know, like there's the Metagenics product SPM, which has the resolvins, but one enzymatic step away from the amino acid. So that's good, because you need a few enzymes to make them, and sometimes those enzymatic pathways aren't so easy. And the enzymes do prefer omega-6, which are generally pro-inflammatory. So it's always kind of a struggle with the fight against inflammation. So, anyway, kind of interesting. Okay, next thing we're going to look at is the adaptive immune response. So the adaptive immune system has basically two divisions. And so on the left there, you've got the humoral immunity, which at the end produces B plasma cells that release antibody into the blood, and they would be against the specific pathogen. Over here on the right, you've got, this is the pathway for producing T killer cells, and they will kill virus-infected cells. Here you've got the pathogen. This cell, you can see it's got this little red blip on there. Red blip is MHC, or major histocompatibility complex, which sounds extremely complicated, so I'll stick with MHC. And so what it does, both of them swallow it in, munch it up, munch. And then you can see here, they put a little piece of the pathogen on the MHC here, and you can see it there. And so this is why it's called an antigen presenting cell, because it's presenting a piece of the antigen, which is the pathogen. Probably should be called pathogen presenting cell. They're so confusing, those guys. And so you can see here, here's the antigen presenting cell. It presents to this is a T helper cell. Then you get this activation and differentiation that produces B plasma cells, which will then release antibody here, which is specific for this pathogen and this pathogen alone. And when it finds it, it'll clump on. It'll sort of go clump, 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 clump. When you have enough clumps, your phagocytes going, hey, you shouldn't be there. And they come along and they munch it up and munch. And that's, and so that cleans your blood of pathogens, which is important because, you know, for the virus, if it infects you, it gets into a cell, but then it's released, and then it wants to travel in your blood to get somewhere else, infect another part of your body. And certainly what they found with the COVID-19, there's been a lot of secondary problems, especially in the heart and kidneys and the liver. And so anyone who's got issues there, they're at high risk, because once the virus gets there, it creates havoc there. And if you've got risk, you know, kaput. Over here, you've got the same thing. Here, the antigen presenting cell is the B memory cell. So you've got the antibody immunoglobulins actually embedded in the membrane. Over here, you've got, this is a dendritic cell. And so it presents to the T helper cell, that then differentiates and proliferates the T killer cells. And they will only recognize this pathogen when it's infecting a cell. So the T killer cell comes along and says, aha, you're infected, and it'll inject these cell-killing hormones, which will kill the cell. So these are things like interferon, tumor necrosis factor, few interleukins, you know. This is a T killer cell killing a cancer cell. And just so you know, the mechanism for killing cancer cells and virus infective cells is equal, it's the same thing. And that's what it's designed for, because every day, every person produces cancer cells, but you're immune system goes, and kills them, doesn't let them grow. Sometimes they can inhibit the immune system, and when they inhibit the immune system, that enables the cancer cells to divide and spread. You know, that's when you get metastasized cancers and stuff. So, you know, cancer really is an immune issue. Then you've got the natural killer cells. They're similar. They do the same thing. The only difference is they don't have to go through this long process of antigen recognition. They just recognize if the cell's infected by something. They're more limited in their range, but they work quicker. They're like the rapid response force. Again, natural killer cells. And see what the T killer cells and natural killer cells, they have these hormone granules, and they inject them in and kaput. So when I was talking to Steve, I mean, I'm sure some of you may have seen that, and he you know, I remember it was not last Sunday, the Sunday before, I just taught my first coronavirus course to Australians, and he messaged me, oh, you've got to put the MHC in, because, you know, there's tons of stress in there. So the MHC is found on most cells. You've got two classes, class 1 and class 2. Class 1 is found on every cell. Class 2, only antigen-presenting cells. But he was talking about class 1 because it's the MHC class 1 that puts a piece of the virus onto the membrane that targets the T killer cell and the natural killer cell to kill the cell. And once one of them recognises that's not right, it will do it. So there's a huge stress kinesiologically has been found on the MHC class 1 in coronavirus patients. And that's from Steve. He works with patients that have coronavirus-like symptoms. But, you know, he said he had all the symptoms and he figured out the balancing protocol because he worked on himself. And then when he went to his clinic, and when there's immune thing, it kept coming up. And so this is what he found. And so he's using the NK MHC formats. And here's a table of the MHCs. So you can see you've got a different number of different genes. So you can see here the ABC, they're found on, they're all class 1, they're found on all cells, and their target is the T killer cells. The D is class 2 and only found on antigen presenting cells, and this is targets T helper cells. And then you've got this E and G, and this was news to me. I thought, oh my God, now I get it. It just was like, you know, pick up a penny and drop it. My penny dropped. And this is found on all cells, but the target is natural killer cells, not the T killer cells. So that means natural killer cells can recognize multiple pathogens, but any given T killer cell can only recognize one pathogen and one pathogen alone. Okay. The other thing that Stephen told me, which was kind of interesting, was the medical doctor he works with. He did a lot of research into the symptoms of COVID-19, which is the disease of SARS coronavirus 2, and he came to the conclusion that the symptoms of coronavirus are caused by transforming growth factor beta 1. And in my hormone course that I wrote, I don't know how many years ago, but it was a long time ago, probably 18 years ago or 20, I had a format for TGF-beta1, and then he said there was another gene called SPARK, and what SPARK does is it upregulates TGF-beta1. So he just put these, he would balance these formats, and what he found was when he did that, the symptoms of coronavirus would just go. It's kind of interesting. I mean, you know, to hear him talk about it, look at the interview online, it's fascinating for him to talk about it. And so he used these formats from my work to balance people with COVID-19-like symptoms. And he found that when he did that, the symptoms would go. So, now, the interesting, one of the interesting things about this was the method of entry into the cell and the viral activation. And they were talking about endopeptidases. And so basically an endopeptidase is an enzyme that cuts a protein in the middle. And so what they found was this enzyme furin. Because very early when all the news articles started coming out in February, they mentioned a website in China where they posted all the pre-publication, you know, if you're going to publish a scientific paper, they would post it on this website for people to review. And so they were talking about this website and the coronavirus. And so I went and I found the paper, and what they found is this enzyme called furin. And they found when they blocked furin, the coronavirus SARS-2 couldn't enter cells, or it entered slowly. It used the traditional method through the ACE2 receptor. This other one, the TMPRSS2, this is the one that HIV and Ebola used, but this one's new. And so they think this one is the one that's actually involved with the viral entry into the cell and the membrane fusion. And like all enzymes, they only work at specific amino acids. This one works at serine, arginine, and lysine, which is kind of interesting. You know, I mean, I like all these little details. I mean, I know not everyone likes them, but you know, whatever. So then we had to look at a balancing strategy, and you know, you balance your locations. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to show you how to do that. How the virus interacts with the cell, that's kind of complex, but we can still sort of, what I'm going to share with you is a format for the coronavirus, the one I developed 18 years ago. And the coronavirus immune balance, well, basically, you know, balancing the immune system, you're going to have macrophages and inflammation pathways and the natural killer cells, and then the adaptive immune response, which is basically T killer cell production and B plasma cell and antibody production. But, you know, we're not, you know, on an online webinar, we're not going to be covering all that little detail there. But certainly some of you may have done the course I've written, and we go into all these little nooks and crannies. But anyway. So just to explain acupressure formatting, and it's a technique that was developed by Richard Utt in applied physiology. And this was developed a long time ago. He wrote, there was 2 workshops he had that were involved. One was the brain course he wrote. He called it AP in the brain, and Charles taught it as brain physiology. So he had all these formats for the 24 areas of the limbic brain. Revolutionary. And also he had some formats for amino acids as well. And so what he did was, you know, initially in kinesiology, we started using finger modes, which are basically mudras. And so when you activate a mudra, you activate the nadi system. The nadi system activates the chakra system. And also a mudra represents a yoga asana, and all yoga asanas are methods of healing or balancing chakras. So when you use a mudra, what you do is you're using the chakra nadi system. So normally what we do when we do in kinesiology is that, say you might hold, we call them finger modes, but basically it's a mudra. You know, you'd hold one and then test an indicator muscle. And if it shows a change, you'd say, oh, there's stress on that mudra. So these are a couple of well-known ones. That one's anatomy, and that's gland. And then the other thing we do in kinesiology is we use acupoints or indicator points. We'll hold an acupoint or indicator point and test a muscle. So what the a format does is actually combines them. And it was kind of genius because, you know, all schools of kinesiology, you know, hold this mode test, hold that point test. Now, but combining them, it's like the analogy I use is that of a chord. You know, it's like when you hold a single note or a single mudra, it's like a note, but if you hold them together, it's like a chord. So that's the music analogy. Like, you know, when I sit at piano, I can play Stairway to Heaven with two fingers, A, B, C, B, A, B, A, B, C, D. It's like, if you listen to Jimmy Page play it, I mean, it's just not the same thing. You know, it's much more complex. You know, has much more subtle, you know, it's much more subtle. And so what formats do is reveal stress, because you hold a format for something and test an indicator muscle, and if it shows, you're revealing stress. And so that's really fascinating to me. So as I said, I would share the format, and so this is the format. So this is for you to use in your practice, not to only use in your practice. No, I'm going to make a coronavirus workshop based on this kind of thing. The format is virus mode, and you can see on the left there, that's virus mode. It originally came from Richard Att, very... as far as I know, he was the first person to use it. He had all these interesting modes, and a lot of them disappeared when he did. But, you know, I did get, when I was a student, I was given a sheet of his modes, and when I made my manual meridians, modes and format, I made sure I included all his in there. So at least there's a record of them that's more available now for kinesiologists. Occasionally I use one like the food group mode in Nutrition C. It's like, who would have thought I'd use that? But I did. So it's virus mode, and then small intestine 18, which you can see is just there by the cheekbone. So this is the format that I found 18 years ago. I didn't even realise I had it. And you know, like a couple months ago when I started writing the course, the first thing I do is go to the manual that it's in, called the Disease Micro Database from the Immune 2, and I just look, first thing I do is look in there, there's a coronavirus, and people started talking about it. And I would put, you know, we have a group, a Facebook group for NK practitioners, and I posted, format is blah, 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 if you haven't done Immune 2, but everyone who'd done Immune 2, you already knew the format. They already looked it up, you know. So this is how you can use the... this is how you can use a format to represent the stress of coronavirus. Kinesiology is not a diagnostic tool. You understand that? Not a diagnostic tool. We cannot use it for diagnosis. All we can say is it shows stress. Everyone has stress at the moment. Everybody. Everybody is so stressed out. And, you know, the emotion, there's so much fear, you know, there's this general fear. Everyone, you know, I was overseas and I was watching, you know, when it first broke, and then, you know, the news reports were coming from Australia. No one can buy toilet paper. It's like toilet paper defense against the coronavirus in Australia, you know. And even the other day, I had to go down there and I said, "Oh, have you got any toilet paper?" "No, not really." I go, "Oh my God, my son and I, we've got one, two guys, we've got one roll of toilet paper in the house." They come out the back and they give me a pack of 4, and it's like, "Thank you." For 2 guys, it'll last us quite a while. But it's like, seriously, you've got to like negotiate with shop owners for toilet paper. And that's because everyone's in this state of fear. I lived like 3 years in India. We never used toilet paper. We just use a bucket of water. You know what? It's not such a big deal. I mean, food's more important. I'd be running around buying food. Of course, I'm going down to the pub getting a couple of cases of beer each to have them in the shed. I'm sorry enough. Anyway. So, so this is the format, but then what we have to do is look at the location. And the location of where we can balance it. And, some of the important locations for the immune system, for example, is in the thymus. And the muscle test for thymus is infraspinatus. So infraspinatus, the thymus is where we mature the T cells. And so when I showed you before, we had the T killer cells and the T helper cells. They all came from our thymus. I mean, they started life in the bone marrow, but they have to go to the thymus to mature. The spleen, and I'm talking about spleen meridian, and this is thymus from the triple heater meridian. Spleen meridian is about the immune system. So there's the middle trapezius muscle test, and the lung, because it's where infection is the deltoid, and also you could use heart, which is subscapularis, which is the opposite. And so when in a minute, I'm going to show you balancing, and I'm going to, for all of you who are kinesiologists out there, I'm going to rock your paradigm and show you how to activate these much quicker than a muscle test. And I'm going to demonstrate how to do it on me. I'm going to balance myself. And so what I might do now, is I might take, give everyone a 5-minute pee break, shall we say? And then we will come back and I will demonstrate the use of kinesiology, and we'll use the format and other things, other cool things in working with coronavirus. How does that sound for everyone? 5 minutes is all good. Like, it's not like I'm giving you a choice anyway. Anyway. Okay, so let's continue. So before we start, or before I start my self-balance, which you're going to love my self-balance, cool. I just want to show you something, and I was talking before about the emotions. And I think working with emotions is really important. I mean, obviously there's fear. There's going to be a lot of fear, and for those who work with NK, the fear system, also the burnout balance would be quite important, because it's the third stage of stress. Is, especially at the moment we're okay, this has only been going on, but can you imagine if we're locked down for 6 months? People are going to be burning out, just with stress. And I'm fortunate because I have a large house on a property and I just share it with one son, and so I've got plenty of room. But other people in small apartments, being locked up in your apartment and no fresh air, or you can't even walk on the grass, people are going to be really stressed out. So obviously fear is something really important. But what I'm going to share with you now is something I haven't shown to anyone yet. This is first. There's a colleague of mine in Madrid, Monica Blasquez, is one of the most brilliant people I've ever met in my life. Her understanding of the emotion and disease is incredible. And you can ask her about any condition and she can tell you what emotions you will find in that person. Hard to talk to because she speaks no English and she speaks Spanish. I speak Spanish because my family's from South America, but still my Spanish is not as good as to really fully grasp everything that she says. But anyway, she sent me an email. We exchanged some emails, and she's always gives from the heart, and her knowledge comes from her clinic. It's not something she thinks of. It's if she tells you something, it's because she observed in X number of clients. So, here we go. So this is what she said. She sent me an email that the coronavirus takes advantage of feelings of loss and defeat. People feel very guilty for what they have done to the planet, and they see no way out of the current environmental and political situations. We have been feeling guilty and defeated for months for everything we have consumed and the way we have mistreated the world. This has produced these feelings of guilt and defeat in most people in the world today. And she's a professor in Chinese medicine, and she said in traditional Chinese medicine, pneumonia is related to losses that are unrecoverable, like the loss of the mother, for example. And I know about 4.5 years ago, I had pneumonia and I had a specific trigger. It triggered my loss. As a child, I grew up in Australia away from my father, and so I had this huge grief not having my father around me when I was growing up. And then there was just something someone said, or no, I read it in a book, and it was like this, intense grief from pneumonia, like she's saying. And I knew that what it was. And I actually even went to Ecuador and spent the time in my father's apartment recovering, and so then spent the last 4 years, going through the process of spending time with him and healing, and even to his passing last week. And it was all very healing, and I actually found my peace with it. But I know because the thing is, people are getting pneumonia, so this is these intense grief, unresolved grief. So people need to come to terms with unresolved grief. We also need to come to terms with the way humanity's treated the planet. For many years, I've been saying, humans, we're a plague. We're destroying the earth. One day the earth's going to come and get us, and then this happens. It's like, oh my God, this is what I was talking about. And, so some of the affirmations that we could use is something like, humanity is able to exist respecting the planet. Humanity is able to facilitate regeneration of the planet, and humanity is able to take responsibility for the planet's regeneration. MJ, I see you're from Ecuador too. ¿Qué pasa? Qué bárbaro que hace ahí, ¿no? Hablaremos después. Bueno, we'll talk later. And so these are some these are some affirmations that I thought of from here, but if you can see some other ones in there, because for me, when we work with emotions, we've got to frame them in the positive. When you set a goal, it's got to be a positive possibility. If your goal is not a positive possibility, it's not a good goal, because it needs to be positive because it's somewhere we want to be, but also needs to be a possibility. So we are only going to go there if we're empowered to go there, because if we're not empowered to go there, we should not go there. So I'm going to stop the share, and I'm going to just move my camera back a little bit. I just moved it up for the, okay. Let's see now. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna. All right. Good. All right. So I'm going to balance myself, and I want everyone to balance themselves too. So we're going to do this together, because we have to, as a community of kinesiologists, we have to de-stress ourselves, because if we're going to empower our clients, because to me, the role of a practitioner, especially a kinesiologist, because we de-stress people, your job is to empower your clients. My job as a kinesiology trainer is to empower the practitioners so you can empower your clients. That's what I've learned in 20 years of teaching kinesiology. It simply gets down to a chain of empowerment. I empower you, you empower the next person, but you're going to empower many people. So every one person I empower gets spread exponentially, because I'm the trainer, you're the practitioner. You know, you are going to work with all your clients. I just work with you. But then there's the next one, and they have all their clients or their clients or their clients. That's what I've been doing for 20 years. And I have amazing practitioners I've worked with in Europe, America, Australia, incredible, incredible practitioners. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do self-testing, and you know, there's various ways you can do self-testing, and I'm going to use my brachioradialis, so here on my arm, mainly because you can see it, and it's very easy to use. I mean, you know, if you want to walk into a shop and test which veggies you want to get or something like that. I mean, I don't do that. I just use my intuition. But, and I tend to use my intuition a lot, but right now what I want to do is share with you the, just how you can do self-testing. But some people do like this or whatever way you do self-testing is absolutely fine. Because when you're working remotely with other people or yourself, there's no one there. So you have to self-test. And now a lot of kinesiologists, we can't work with people. So we have to self-test. So if you don't know how to do it, or you doubt yourself, get over it, get over yourself. It's time to get over that and get on with making a difference in the world, because you haven't got time to pander to your insecurities or anything like that. You have to empower yourself and empower other people. We have to do this. The world needs us. There is no time for that now. You got it? You need to go out there and make a difference. So I'm doing this because I want to make a difference. If I can get 160 people that are online now making a difference in the world, you know, you're the ones that are going to make the change. I don't even have a clientele because I'm always traveling and teaching, you know. So I'm going to do this test. Okay. And so I'm going to do the format. I'm going to hold virus mode. I'm going to use the stacking. And then small intestine 18. See how that goes. And often you'll find this format in stress because we're so fucking stressed out with this thing. It is stressing people. You just turn the news on. You go into the shops, you know. I mean, I'm like, you know, like my father died a week ago of lung complications. I mean, he didn't die from COVID-19, but he died because he couldn't get oxygen because he had a bacterial infection, you know, because all the oxygen was gone, you know. Okay, so I'm going to, we've got stress here. I'm going to see crown chakra. Okay, I'm going to use the crown chakra to de-stress. So everyone can de-stress your crown chakras if you want, or wherever suits you. And I can see you too, so if you're not doing it, I know you're not doing it, but that's all right. Okay. All right. And then what I want to do is, you know, I just like to break down paradigms, so I'm just going to tell you this. I'm going to show you how you can make muscle testing obsolete. Here I am, a kinesiologist, neurokinesiologist, and it's like, yeah, muscle testing's obsolete, don't worry about it. So, you know, when you do a muscle test, you know, so for instance, deltoid, which is lung, which is very relevant, you hold your arm out here, and the muscles here, you hold it in contraction, and you push down, right, against contraction. A muscle physiologically, actually, you know, when you look at the deltoid muscle here, what it does is it actually, the action of the muscle is to bring the arm up like this. Because when a muscle physiologically, what it does is it's extended, which means that the fibers are stretched out. And then as the muscle contracts, you move. So the action of the muscle is from extension to contraction. So I'm curious, why do we test the muscle contraction to extension when it's not even the natural way the muscle moves? So if you just get someone to perform the action, like the action of the deltoid's like this, so I'm going to stack that in. Okay. And the deltoid is connected to the lung meridian. And so any stress in the lungs will demonstrate in the lung meridian, so I can do that. So I can test my muscle. Okay. So I'm going to read the affirmations. Humanity is able to exist. I'm going to hold the emotional stress release points. Humanity is able to exist respecting the planet. Humanity is able to facilitate regeneration of the planet. Humanity is able to take responsibility for the planet's regeneration. I'm at peace with my loss. I can have peace with my loss. Okay. And now let's do this again. Action of the muscle. And it's not stressed out anymore. And I tell you, if you test the client's deltoid, get them to do the action and de-stress the action and come back and test the deltoid, it'll be corrected for sure. Okay, spleen, middle trapezius. So middle trapezius is like this. Normally we test it from here to here because when we have our arms here, it's contracted, and we test contraction to extension, which is like that. But if we do this movement like this, that's the middle trapezius. So that is the spleen, and the spleen is certainly involved with humoral immunity. That's your B plasma cells because that's where they work. So I'm going to hold my crown chakra. Getting a lot of crown chakra stress associated with this. And I'm going to read the affirmations. Human is able to exist respecting their planet. Humanity is able to facilitate the regeneration of the planet. Humanity is able to take responsibility for the planet's regeneration. Okay. Cool. Let's do this again. Cool. Good. Now the other one we want to do is the thymus, so that's infraspinatus, which is like this. But interestingly enough, the opposite is supraspinatus, oh no, subscapularis, I mean, which is for heart. So when you do this, is thymus, heart, thymus, heart, thymus, heart. Okay, I put that in. And crown chakra. Everyone hold the crown chakra. Balance your crown chakra. Okay. Cool. And I could do the emotions again, or the affirmations. And also you could look at the, lung emotions, spleen emotions, triple heater emotions, triple heater thymus, it's triple heater, so you use triple heater emotions. And for the heart emotions. And so they're all ways you can go deep into emotion. The other thing you could investigate is fear. And this is the fear from, this morning I went to the farmers market here in Mooloolaba, and gee whiz, it's just interesting to see the state people are in. And, even going to a market stall to buy your organic veggies in the morning is an operation. And then the people in Mooloolaba, they've got no idea. No idea. But anyway, I guess they haven't read the reports of their family in Ecuador, but 3.5 weeks ago I was in Spain. So anyway, so that's the kinesiology. And so what I might do now, all 160 of you, is call for any questions. Oh, someone's calling corona also refers to the crown. It's not surprised crown chakra is involved. Yeah, corona is crown. And also for me, when I de-stress through the crown chakra, what I find interesting about that, it's really the spiritual path. And your spiritual path is about overcoming really hardcore life challenging situations. So when you looked at those emotions of Monica, what I see, it's humanity's karma. Not that I like to use that word karma. I think it's a dreadful word, but anyway, it's kind of like the karma of humanity from the way we've treated the earth. So definitely, I think it's very interesting to make that connection with corona and crown. Yeah. Laura, my samskara balance. Yeah, she did that. Laura, I'd never forget that balance you gave me in Perth. Yep. 5G impact on COVID-19. I don't know. I mean, I'm going to do a talk on the on EMF and 5G. I mean, there's all this talk about it. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I have to understand the science and the physics and the physiology before I will talk about it. I will talk about 5G. I will talk about EMF stress, and I'll show you the connection. It's up to you to work with your clients and see if that connection comes through. So, yeah, Yolanda says the way we treated the earth is the same way we treat ourselves. This is a big chance to become more human as we're meant to be. Absolutely, Yolanda. You are such a wise woman. I adore you, and I've loved working with you over the last 20 years. You're an incredible person and have incredible insight, And hopefully I'll get back there to the Netherlands one day and we can work together again. So I don't have a view on 5G. Someone's asking. would be most concerned about money. And I wonder if solar plexus and sacral chakra. I find money more base chakra. Money is actually earth energy, because money is about the, you know, the fruits of the earth, and the base chakra is about, you know, existing in the earth. So the way we exist on the earth is threatened. So I would see this whole thing as a real threat to the base chakra and money. And, you know, I mean, not everyone's concerned with money. Certainly the people in Australia, if you can get this JobKeeper or JobSeeker or coronavirus supplement or something, you know, you certainly will have enough to get by. I mean, people are stressing out about it, you know, they're panic buying toilet paper. So that's base chakra, because it's fruits of the earth, you know, and fruits of the earth are that. MJ had a vision of the earth light up and chest breathing is labouring. Anyone else see anything? Is it always crown chakra balancing? No, it's just that what I find with this, you know, I use varied methods of de-stressing. And to me, when I use a de-stressing method, for me, de-stressing tells you about the quality of the stress. So the quality of this stress for me is crown chakra, which is about your spiritual path. But I use a lot the naps, which is, you know, it might have fear or rage. So, you know, the quality of the stress is that. So you could test neuro NEs or NLs or meridian, or there's just many things you can do. For me, about stress, you find something that works. It's, you know, I have, you know, whatever works, anything is possible. Sometimes you just need something to work, because sometimes if the stress is intense, it can be hard to find something that works, you know. So you put the mode and point in circuit, test muscle balance chakra. Now you put the mode and circuit in, the mode and the point in as like a challenge. So you could put it all in through the balance. I could have actually kept putting it in at each step because it has the frequency of coronavirus. Formats to me are stress identifiers. They reveal stress for you. And so when you reveal stress, you know, then you have to find a way to diffuse this stress. And the affirmations, I think you can use all the way through it. I mean, I think, or even you can set them like a goal, you know. Should we incorporate fats as the envelope is basic? Well, a fat is like a membrane. So I think, you know, I think, Laura, the thing is about the fats is the omega-3s are really important, because we need to resolve inflammation. And because a lot of COVID-19 patients go into this chronic inflammatory state, and you get this massive fibrosis in their lungs. So, Gemma, you're on there. What's Gemma saying? My adopted daughter. Mini balance, your power stress is oscillating between stomach 1 for earth element and maybe crown base reactivity too. Yeah, cool. Yeah, I mean, we're all threatened by the base chakra at the moment. So, corona has a malaria-like action. It splits oxygen from heme on the red blood cells and uses your oxygen. That's why people get air hungry. Okay, Gail, that's kind of interesting. I'd like to know more about that. And it's interesting they're using the malaria drug against it. You know, Trump, you know, there's a couple of, I mean, I think they first started using it in Europe, and then Trump was talking about it. They're using chloroquine against it. So Helene is saying, oh, she did the course already and she's been, crown chakra came up, good. Interesting link to spiritual path and life emotion. Yeah. Is it Joe Zach? I mean, I feel he sat at the edge of the cliff at the beach and felt quite sick, fear, nausea, quite a sense of universe on my doorstep. It is. I mean, you know what's sickening is the way we've treated the earth. I mean, you know, humanity has to come to terms with that. And if it doesn't, this will just happen again. Red wine is good. Yeah, I just ordered a few cases from Durhamburg in the McLaren Vale. They do a very good Shiraz. DHA, EPA, omega-3s rather than omega-6. Yep, exactly. The lung surfactant is essential fatty. Yeah, that's right. You've got this lung surfactant that actually works in the alveoli and maintains the membrane so you can exchange oxygen. So that's good. What do I think of the ketogenic diet? I'm on it. I try to be anyway. It's good for me, works for me. So. Soap, someone says soap kills fat outside the cell and stops it from adhering to it just to go. So is the spike proteins that is killing? I've got no idea about that, you know, but the thing is, I mean, you'd need soap inside of you. I mean, on your hands maybe, but it's there. Okay, yeah, malaria drugs, yep. We'd be interested to hear more about that, Gail, what you know about that connection to the malaria. It's very interesting. If you do not experience symptoms, is it still in the aura? Yeah, I would reckon. I mean, you still have an energetic template. I think this is showing, the format shows on a lot of people because the whole coronavirus is not just about if you've got it or not, the symptoms. I think it's going to become like an archetype or probably even become a miasm, you know. And so it'll be something that'll stress humanity for generations. We're even living in a time now that we could find this way of stressing people for like generations to come. Keto works for me. You know, Europe hospital use antibiotics with anti-malarial. Yeah. Keto works for me. I'm an O blood type. I'm O blood too. Thanks, Sinead. And Gail's going to send me the information. Wonderful. And then someone agrees it'll be a miasm for future kinesiologists. It will. Absolutely. We got to work with it. And that's why, you know, showing you what I know today, I think I've given you some really good tools. Some of you have done the course I wrote, and that's more tools, but more focused on the acupressure formatting in depth. Anything you can do to support the immune system, anti-inflammation. I think the inflammation's important, you know, so people could even consult with naturopaths or something about that, you know, get on the SPM, which is a good anti-inflammatory, you know, from Metagenics. And, you know, there's many different things you can do, but, you know, I really think that we're humanity's at a crossroad, and I think we all need to step up and start taking responsibility for the way we treat the earth and having respect for each other. And because it's really hard. And I know I had a tough day when I went to the market. It's just was so stressful and you know, I mean, it get to the point where I won't want to go there anymore, you know. But, you know, I want to go to the farmer's market, get the good veggies. Okay, thank you everyone. And so I'm going to sign off now. And someone says that homeopaths are already working on it. Awesome, for a miasm. That's awesome. Thanks, Nicole. I love to know that because that's something I just tuned into. But other people have tuned into it too, which means it's a fact. I mean, it's clear to me it's a miasm. And an archetype. So everyone, thank you very much. And if you want to do, we've got another one coming up soon. Carrie is the NK Institute point person who's managing all the contacts for this. And I'd just like to say a big thank you to her because she was overwhelmed with emails and she rang me and said, I've got all these emails, but she worked through it. And hopefully next time we'll have a more automated system put in place. We just weren't expecting the overwhelming response. We thought we'd get a few people. And so big thank you to Carrie for organising that for NK Institute. And you've all had contact with her. And so I'd like to thank you all, and please do good work. And remember, you know, we're here for the benefit of our clients. And as soon as we stop working for the benefit of our clients, you are wrong. And that's always something I always come back to is I'm here to empower you, to empower your clients. My job is to empower you. Your job is to empower them. And that's it. And if you're not doing that, you need to look at why you're doing it. Absolutely. So thank you. And I'll see you next time if you're all there. And goodbye.